Hi, I'm Sharon Small, founder of the Clean Language Institute. Each year here on the Central Coast of California, we have a four-part training we call Clean Convergence. This 2019 is going to be our fourth year running, and we're very excited to present another new and innovative idea from Penny Tompkins and James Lawley. They come and run a program called Integrating and Enhancing Your Symbolic Modeling Skills, each year bringing something interesting, curious, and applicable to their training room. So I've got about 18 minutes of a conversation with Penny Tompkins and James Lawley that I'd like to share with you. And I hope that you find it as interesting and fun as I did. And perhaps we will see you in January 2019 here on the Central Coast of California. All right, let's go. So, we've been talking about symbolic modeling and facilitation. And at Clean Convergence, each year you've brought something really exciting and new for your 3-day integrating and enhancing symbolic modeling skills. And this year, you guys have this idea about an approach to working with physical symptoms and the ecology of systems. And I'm really curious about this.
We haven't formally worked and codified how to work with physical symptoms until recently. But I did look out a quotation from David Grove, which I have here, and I'll read to you. He said, "Symptoms are trying their best to heal the situation, but can't. The metaphor is a container which not only contains information about your symptoms, but also your history."
Okay.
So that was from David. And basically, one of the main things that's interesting about physical symptoms is working with them through metaphor, because the body's language for describing those symptoms, the only language it has is through metaphor.
Yeah. So to state the really obvious, then one of the things that makes working with physical symptoms is the symptom manifests itself in the body, in some way in the body. And so, that's one of the things that kind of makes it different from other kinds of symptoms, which might not have an obvious physical manifestation. And so picking up on David's quote, the symptom, the form that it has, the way that it works, the relationship the person has with their symptom, all of that is a container of information. And the interesting thing about it, it's mostly tacit information. We don't know what our body knows until we, as David used to say, until it confessed its strengths. So clean language allows you, is a wonderful means of being able to bring that tacit knowledge out of the physicality of the body and into language, which then means we can work with it. So in the broadest sense of the word, that's what we'll be doing. Does that give you some idea?
Some idea. So for those people who are familiar a little bit with clean language and symbolic modeling, how is this work different to what they might learn on a core symbolic modeling course?
Well, by very definition, a physical symptom is a problem. But the interesting thing is, when you start to investigate, what you find is that the problematic aspect of the physical symptom may not in of itself be the physical symptom. What's problematic is not necessarily the physical symptom, although that's what captures a person's attention. Okay. So that's one thing we investigate. And, especially we've been spending a long time raising the profile about desired outcomes, and they're absolutely vital in this work. But given the nature of a physical symptom, then we will be looking at how you work with the problematic nature of them, the problematic aspects, and but the person's relationship with those physical symptoms, you know, and especially the longer a person has had a physical symptom, the more they will have some kind of relationship, which itself will be looped back in and be part of what's going on for the person. So we'll be going into the problematic aspects. We'll be working very directly with the body, and staying with the body as a kind of what's the word, as the grounding of the work. But then from there we move to this whole series of relationships. You know, the body is an unbelievably complex, adaptive system, and the relationship between the person and their symptoms, the person and the body themselves, the relationship between the person and the healing process. That's a really interesting thing. How does a person relate to healing, and how does the person relate to the fact that if they've had the symptoms, well, they haven't healed, and they've probably tried 100 things.
And what's the relationship between a medical diagnosis they've been given and their healing? What's a relationship between their attitude toward the medication they've been giving and what they've been told about it? Because they're being influenced all the time. And so these are some of the things that we will be addressing. And I think one of the main differences is we'll be just talking about the ethics of working with physical symptoms.
Yeah.
A very important area. And also, James and I have realized that there are some additional principles that we have discovered when we're working with physical symptoms. And we'll be going into those and the principles that we are operating under when we work with this client base.
Okay, so a little bit different principles, and then the ethics. And the ethics, because you're working with something that could or could not have a medical background to it?
Well, I mean, if it's a physical symptom, it will have a medical background, and it may also, you know, there are consequences. I mean, you know, the people that we've worked with, some of them have had some very serious illnesses, and it's really important to respect the potential downsides of working with someone with a serious illness. And so it's really important to take those things into account, to respect the medical diagnosis that they've had and their relationship with that. And you know, all of these things go into the mix, and they're all part of what's happening for a person. And so one of the fascinating things is kind of how do you unpick that, and how do you put the spotlight of attention on the piece that's most important for that person?
And I think we all know that a lot of people in the medical profession, what we call unintended influence, say things to people about their health and their condition that influence them, and they take away what has been predicted or what has been said. Yeah. And that influences relationship with their symptom and their health. So how do we...
My neurosurgeon saying, oh, you know, debilitating headaches and seizures.
Exactly.
And my mind goes, seizures, oh my God, right? Like, can I drive? Is it okay to like walk and chew gum? But really what he means is hand tremors. Like, could he have been more clear? Yes. Yeah. So
we work with all the client's relationship to all of these aspects of the body and physical symptoms, as well as the psychological.
Yeah. And you mentioned like the ecology of systems, and even using this, I think in an email we had, you were talking about using it with groups in some way. Is that right?
You know, once you start thinking from a systems point of view, you start thinking systemically, then, you know, what is a human? But it is a collection of systems. You know, all of the medical systems that we know. And They interact, so they are already a collection of systems that work together. And within, depending on how far you want to go down, within that, there's a whole series of systems. So that is possible to then go the opposite direction and start to look like a collection of individuals.
Okay.
And apply the same principles that you would to the systems within an individual, to the collection of, the principles, the relationships across individuals. The principles, carry across in many ways, many times.
Yeah, you got me curious in Bali when we were talking about this, because I have the brain bump. I had another diagnosis and fatigue, and it really caught my curiosity when you were talking about the relationship to the symptom, and the symptom not being the problem necessarily. So I'm really curious about the subtleties of looking at this idea that of these relationships and really kind of calibrating, honing in, like you were saying, on what is the problematic material and where can an outcome or a possibility come from that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? While still working with something that just may be the way it is. There might be pain, there might be odd symptoms that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that the longer a symptom has been in existence or gone away and come back a whole number of times, then the more layers of stuff that will be involved. Apart from all the medical diagnosis, apart from the medication, I'm sure everybody's had loads of advice given to them. Yeah. They've tried loads of things themselves. They may well have tried all sorts of alternative therapies, some of which will help, some of which won't. They'll have read all sorts of books, and they'll have their own beliefs and fantasies about what's going on. And then there's the physical body doing what it does. All of these things will get layered on top of each other. And what to me is really fascinating about this then is kind of separating these things out, finding a way for the person to separate them out so they can see them, metaphorically see them, and out of that place their attention on the piece that, if that starts to change, that has a knock-on effect on the next piece and the next piece, so on. So we're always looking for the smallest possible change that sets and train a new direction.
And I wonder about consultants called into businesses, or businesses who are looking at their own structures and operations. Because often what they're describing as happening are symptoms in the organization. They don't call them that necessarily. Yeah. But if you think about them structurally in a similar way that James was just describing, then you can begin to look at what's happening and what are the symptoms of what's happening in this organization? What are the relationships between the different parts of the organizations to that symptom? Mm-hmm. What is problematic about that symptom for these different aspects? So it's interesting that that's how you can map this on to looking at organizations or small or large groups.
Yeah. So this is really going to be utilizing symptoms in the body as like kind of the base structure, but the principles and the dynamic of it and the thinking can be used in business as well. Thinking of the group as an as a system and an organism in a way.
So a large part of this is for people to acquire thinking systemically, a way to think systemically, not just a way to think about systems, but to actually have embedded in their way of thinking a relationship to systems that is kind of I don't know if it ever comes naturally to humans, but you can develop that, and so you can kind of work with the wholes and the structures without necessarily knowing every piece. In fact, you're never going to know every piece. You're never going to know all the relations, but you can know enough, and you can keep that systemic thinking as a basic background. in order to not do the kind of standard interventions that are occurred. And it's not that they're not valuable in some cases, they are when they work. And when they don't, then what?
Yeah.
And as a general rule, you know, that if these are complex things that have been going on for a long time, the most obvious it needs something else that, other than the most obvious. And we don't know what that is. We don't have any magic prediction that comes out of the work, that emerges out of the work.
We were going to look at an example. And do you have somebody that you've been working with?
Yes. We have a fascinating example of a woman who had multiple sclerosis, MS, and it was increasingly becoming difficult for her to balance on the underground, the subway, and going downstairs. And she had a stick, but even that was becoming a bit tenuous. And she came and developed a metaphor for stability for her. And so stability like a stake in the ground. So when she found that she was walking downstairs, if she started to feel that unstable, she just paused and thought of her stick as a stake in the ground, and found that stabilized her, so that she wasn't frightened of falling, she could continue. And so just having that metaphor gave her something she could think about that could help her in that situation. There's a lot of examples of metaphor being helpful with physical symptoms, and our Mind, Metaphor, and Health article is a place to see a lot of them.
And that example is such a good one in that, you know, she wanted physical balance, but of course there's the whole metaphorical and emotional balance as well. And as you work in this way, you can work with all of those things at the same time. It might start off with a physical balance, and you realize there's an emotional balance connected, which then feeds back into the physical aspect. So that for me, that's one of the fascinating things about this. About it really exposes that there isn't a mind and body. It is all part of a whole integrated system.
I think it's going to be fascinating in January in California.
Yeah.
As we go into this and have the opportunity to look at all of these different aspects of working with physical symptoms, and how systemics, the applications of systemic thinking in other areas.
Super. And you guys mentioned an article, Mind, Metaphor, and Health, as something that people can go to as a little bit of a resource to find out a little bit more about the thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can also, there's another article that we wrote called Body Awareness. And what that is about kind of looking at the body from this perspective. Useful background information for getting people to think about the body, how it works from this kind of perspective.
We can send you the links, and you can send it out to anyone.
I will post the links. So for anybody watching this, the links should be underneath the video. And I am so excited about you guys coming back to California, 4th year in a row. And I love how every year you just bring something challenging, unique, and accessible to even newer learners that follow on the earlier trainings.
I think it's, as I say, I think it's going to be a really interesting time.
Yep. Super.
Thank you, Sharon.